is Tyler, and welcome to Context for Kids, episode 36, Torah Portion, Balak. It's numbers 22:2 to 25:9, but I call this episode The Curse of Balaam, because it sounds so much more melodramatic. Alright, so this is a totally weird Torah portion. No Israelites get mentioned until the last 9 verses. No Moses, no Aaron, no this, no that. No. It all has to do with these new characters, King Balak and the prophet Balaam. But he is not your ordinary kind of prophet. He's really an odd kind of duck, and this week we're going to talk about him. Alright, so, what the heck? I mean, what the heck is going on with not mentioning any of the people? This has never happened before. We don't go through any other Torah portion. Doesn't have to do directly with the Israelites, where at least the words, and the Lord said to Moses, aren't spoken. This is just kind of like this behind-the-scenes thing going on, and you know, sometimes things are like that in our lives, aren't they? Seems like God's not there, but He's actually working somewhere behind the scenes. So, let's go here. So, who's Balak about? Well, it's not about Balak. Remember, the Torah portion is always named after like one of the first words of the Torah portion. In this case, it just happens to be Balak, and he was the king of Moab. Now, you might remember that Moab, well, there was the Moabites and the Ammonites. And they were the descendants of Lot and his daughters after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. They're kind of this cursed people, but we're going to find out they're also kind of a protected people. God goes to great lengths to protect them because of Abraham's relationship with Lot, and of course God's relationship with Abraham. Remember, anyone who blesses you I will bless, anyone who curses you I will bless. Well, Lot and Abram were close, very close. Uncle and nephew, but really at one point I believe that Lot would have been Abraham's heir. So they were very close. And even though they separated, it wasn't because they'd done anything wrong to each other. Alright, so this week we're going to talk about something that's called a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you see it in literature all over the world. Now, what's a self-fulfilling prophecy? A self-fulfilling prophecy is when somebody in a story receives an omen or some sort of divination from somebody and says, such and such will happen. And the people go through and they jump through all these hoops to do everything they can to try and keep that terrible thing from happening, and everything they do actually makes it happen. Okay, this week is a perfect example of that. Now, we see self-fulfilling prophecies in the story of King Cyrus. Now, this one's actually supposed to be true. King Cyrus that's King Cyrus who's mentioned in the Bible, who ordered the rebuilding of the temple and the return of the exiles from Babylon to Jerusalem. So, he was a really big deal. The Bible even says, my servant Cyrus. Wow. Okay, so we've got Cyrus, and evidently, I'm going to try and remember the names. I believe that his grandfather's name was Mithridates, and he received an omen that his grandson would kill him and take the kingdom. So what does he do? He sends out young Cyrus with the shepherd to be exposed, to be left on a hillside to be eaten by wolves. Well, the shepherd and his wife, they were childless. And so they took Cyrus, raised him as his own, but it later came to be known through just his excellent leadership skills and whatever, that he really was the king's grandson, and he gets reunited with his parents, and he ends up killing his grandfather, which probably never would have happened if he'd just been raised at court, right? I have Oedipus. Oedipus is another famous story where an oracle said, this child, the child that comes from, like, your daughter will do this and this and this. And so the king makes it happen by sending him away, and he doesn't know who he is, and he kills his grandfather by mistake. And crazy stuff. Macbeth. Macbeth received an oracle from 3 witches who said that such and such would happen, which put ideas in his head, which meant such and such, which made such and such happen. So he chose wrongly, but he wouldn't have chosen wrongly maybe if he hadn't gotten the idea from the witches. Now, probably the most famous one nowadays is Darth Vader, if you actually consider episodes 1, 2, and 3 to be legitimate movies. I know, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Not that I'm bitter. Just sorely disappointed. Anyway, so Anakin Skywalker had a dream where he saw his wife dying giving birth. Okay? And so he decides to do anything possible to keep it from happening. In the end, he ends up killing her. Self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's what we're dealing with this week. We're going to deal with another self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, this is one of those interesting stories that shows us that we don't get the whole picture right there in one chapter. See, I could tell you the story that's in Torah Portion Balak, and I could say, well, that's all we know, but that's not all we know. We've got Deuteronomy 2, something very, very interesting happens that sets a backdrop. You see, we missed last week's Torah Portion together because I was sick. And so we didn't go through Torah Portion Hukat. And in Deuteronomy 2, before the killing of Og of Bashan and Sihon of Heshbon, or might be mixing those up in there, before that, and those were Amorite kings, God was very, very definite with the children of Israel. You don't attack the children of Esau for Abraham's sake. You don't attack the children of Moab for Lot's sake. You don't attack the children of Ammon for Lot's sake, because I have given these lands to them, because he had relationship with their relatives, okay? There were promises made, and he promised those lands to them. And we see even in the time of David, we see the Moabites and the Ammonites are still there. As a matter of fact, David is the grandson of the Moabitess Ruth. So we see that God kept his promises to keep them in the land. As a matter of fact, I think it's the capital city of Lebanon to this day is called Ammon. That's not a coincidence. That's their land. All right. So before the destruction of Heshbon and Bashan, it was right there, I didn't even have to guess, God said, you don't mess with these guys. And so we have guarantees there that no matter what omen was delivered to Moab, God had given his word that the children of Israel weren't going to mess with them. Now, we see that what's going to happen in Torah Portion Balak never needed to happen at all. There is this really, really cool article by V. Hurwitz, the expression Uksamim Biadan in Numbers 22:17, in light of divinatory practices from Mari. And it's a really, really cool article, and it says that the dignitaries of Moab, and Mari is one of the ancient cities, ancient nations, where they have done a lot of archaeological work, and we have found out an awful lot about the region of the ancient Near East during the times of the Bible. Really cool stuff. You got Mari, Ugari, just different places, El Amarna, very cool. So, it says that these dignitaries went to a prophet named Balaam who lived way, 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 way up north of Israel, okay? And took, it says in most Bibles, it says, took the fees of divination in their hand. That's not what the Hebrew says. The fees of is not there. That's the translators adding in words that they thought would make it make more sense. It says they went with divination in hand. Well, do you remember we learned about having divination in hand? What's that called? Extispicy. extra spicy. Remember, that's how you spell it, E-X-T-I-S-P-I-C-Y, extra spicy. And that was when you would look at entrails and you would try to determine the future. So it's possible, now this was a 25-day journey, so they didn't really take the entrails. But what if they took a drawing of what it looked like? What if they took a clay model of what that omen looked like, because they wanted to go to Balaam and get a second opinion? That's what this Professor Hurwitz says, and I think he's got a good point. I think it's very, very possible that they went wanting, like you go to a second doctor to get a second opinion. They wanted to see, are we reading this correctly? Is Moab going to be destroyed? Now, so anyway, they get to Balaam. And of course, Balaam says, and they say, we want you to curse these people because they're going to destroy us. The entrails say so. Plausible excuse, right? Yeah, the entrails say so. When entrails start talking to you, it's time to go get help. That's all I gotta say. All right, so, but Balaam says, I can't curse anybody without God's permission. I can only say the words that my God has spoken. So, who is Balaam? Well, he's a prophet, and he's a legitimate prophet. I mean, God talks to him. We have cases where we see God speaking actual words to him, telling him exactly what to say and what not to say, and to do and what not to do. So this guy actually is a prophet. Doesn't mean everything he does is good. Now, he is a follower of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I mean, he says, my God, Yod-He-Vav-He, several times. So it's not like he's doing all this stuff to the Balaam or any other gods. He's going to Yod-He-Vav-He for answers, all right? Now, but he practices divination. Now, here's something that's a little bit confusing. What is divination? Divination is nothing more than trying to figure out the will of a god. And when you do it through a ritual, it's called divination. Now, there was only one kind of divination that was allowed, and that was the priest in the breast pocket of the ephod, the high priest. He had these things called the Tumim and the Thummim. I think I said the Tumim and the Thummim. Urim and Thummim. And they would take them out and they would put them in a bag. And this was a commandment. And when they wanted to know the will of God, if the lot fell 3 times in a row at a certain answer, then they would know that's the will of God. But if they kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth forever, you didn't have an answer and God wasn't talking. So he could either talk or refuse to talk through those things. But, like I said, that was the form of finding out the will of God that was permitted for those with whom God wasn't on specific speaking terms the way he was with Moses and Aaron and some of the prophets. Okay? But that wasn't the kind of divination that Balaam was practicing. We don't know what he was doing, whether it was ecstasy or tea leaves, palm reading, Was he reading people's palms, I see you have a long life. Oh, you don't have a long lifeline because you're going to go and mess with Israel. We don't do that. That's divination. Astrology. Not to be confused with astrology, which is the study of stars, but astronomy, trying to determine futures. Tarot. All those things. Divination. All right, Balaam was eager for profit, as we're going to see. Now, before we get into the story, what happens? No, we're going to tell the story about what happens now. Okay, so they get there and they say, you got to curse these guys for us. And he says, well, I'm going to go and talk to God, and whatever he says, I got to do, because how can I say anything that my God hasn't said? He goes in the back and he, does his little divination, and God says, you are not cursing these people. And he goes out and says, sorry, I can't do anything. So they got to go the 25 days home. And then they got to go to the king of Moab. He's not coming. Well, don't take no for an answer. Give him a better offer. So they come back 25 days. So it's been 50 days. They come to him again. and say, well, you know, he really wants you to come, and he's going to give you blah, 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 anything you want if you do this. And Balaam goes and says, you know, those guys are back, and God says, you know what, here's the deal. Well, and Balaam tells them no and sends them away. And then God says to Balaam, you know what, if they come back, go with them. So if they go on their 25-day journey home, and they come back a third time, go with them and I'll tell you what to do. Well, Balak goes, yes! And he doesn't wait the 50 days or 40 days or however long it takes. He gets on his donkey and he's booking and he's going. And of course, God's really angry because this is not what he said. And the guy wasn't even willing to wait. He said, oh, I know they'll come back. It's just a formality. I'm going. And so, of course, the angel, big angel, stands in the way with big flashing sword. And the donkey has more sense than Balaam. And the donkey's saying, I am so not getting near that. No, angel. Ain't happening. You got to be kidding me. He's pretty stinking scary. And, you know, and Balaam's like beating the poor donkey and he crushes his foot against the rock wall, and then Balaam gets really angry. He's about to kill his donkey, and then God opens the donkey's mouth. Donkey starts talking to Balaam. Balaam does not stop and think how ridiculous this situation is. And he's actually carrying on a conversation with the donkey, none of which ever contains the words, and you're speaking how? No, he's just carrying on like conversation with the donkey like it happens. Maybe he did talk to his donkey all the time. We just don't know. Things they don't include. So he goes and he catches up with them and they're so glad to see him. And they go through this big elaborate ritual where they go up to the tops of hills and they set up 10 altars and Balaam sacrifices to God, our God. And then God gives him blessings to speak over the children of Israel. And this happens like 3 times. And the king of Moab is so angry at that he says, you know what, you better get away from me or you're going to die. And you know what, homie says, what, I told you. Told you I wasn't going to be able to do this. So in the end, Balaam actually does do what is right for now. There's going to be problems later, as we're going to see. Okay, so this is the kind of part that I always enjoy. What does the archaeology tell us about Balaam? Was he real? Oh yeah. See, they found these things called the deer alatex. Remember I told you that this all took place in Moab? Well, Ammon was where Balaam lived, north of Moab. Okay, and 7th century BCE, and BCE means before the Common Era, before Messiah was born. And it's written in Ammonite, in Aramaic script, which is cool, and it talks about Balaam. I kid you not. Guy from the Bible in this. See, so whenever anyone says, oh, this stuff is all made up, I don't think so. Now remember, this stuff would have been handed down from father to son, to father to son, to father, son to father, and son. And then finally somebody, when, you know, they have access to pen and paper and it's plentiful enough, they're writing stuff down. Now this is, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the puzzle piece parchment that they found. Really very cool. And it contains testimony about Balaam, son of Beor. All right. So, just going to read a little bit to you. The account of Balaam, son of Beor, a man who was a seer of the gods. The gods came to him in the night, and he envisioned a vision like an oracle of El. El was the chief god of the Canaanites, by the way. Then they said to Balaam, son of Beor, thus he will do afterward. And Balaam arose the next day and wept deeply, and it's broken up, but proof positive that Balaam of Beor existed, which I think is totally cool. Whoops. There are no more slides. I should have seen that. And so we have got this story about this crazy thing that happened, and we have proof that this character who gets mentioned for, what is it, 2 or 3 chapters? What is it, 22, 23, 24? Yeah, for 3 chapters of the Bible actually existed. So maybe it's really a good thing that the Bible spends so much time focusing on him, but it also gives us this strange story of how God uses some pretty strange people. And even sometimes when people approach him in the wrong way, he's still willing to use them. And even a person who hears from God can do wrong things in wrong ways. So things aren't always so cut and dry. We like them to be black and white. We like to say, well, this person's bad and this person's good. But you know, people are a mixture. Now, Balaam, son of Beor, is going to do something really wrong in an upcoming lesson. And it's going to lead to his death. So we're going to keep an eye out for that. And, well, that's pretty much it for this week. So the children of Israel got blessed and not cursed by a strange prophet who practices divination to talk to the one true God of Israel. Gosh, it's crazy, and if it wasn't in the Bible, I'd never believe it. I just think it was one of those crazy movie plots. But everything's in there for a reason. Okay, so next week we've got Torah Portion Phineas, and I already have all my PowerPoints lined up. We're going to talk about, oh, they talk about the fall feasts. In the next Torah portion, they talk about the Day of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. They talk about the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. They talk about the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. And they talk about Shemini Atzeret, which is, trying to think of the common name for that, and it's just slipping my mind. But we're going to talk about something really, really interesting. We're going to talk about the Rosh Hashanah calendar, because there's a lot of controversy right now, and we're going to talk, can we find the existence of a second calendar based on the Hebrew months in the Bible or not? It's going to be a really cool study, so make sure you tune in. It's going to be awesome. I'm really excited to teach it. It's something that I just recently learned. So that is it for this week. And my clicker's on the floor because I dropped it. Anyway, I missed you guys last week. Have a wonderful week. I love you. I'm praying for you. Have a great week studying the scriptures together. Bye-bye now.